precious child. I've called your name. Nothing can take you from my hand. I'm still the same.
Hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Then Jesus began to teach them. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all of the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So today's gospel reading, what we are hearing there is something that comes after the initial introduction, as we have it in Matthew, of the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, and the Beatitudes begins it, as it were. And it's a bit of a mandate and a bit of a blueprint for Jesus saying, this is how to live under God's blessing. This is how to live and experience inner peace and joy and contentment. And of course, we are familiar with many of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed, etc., etc. And from that point, in the way that Matthew records his gospel, we now move on to some more teaching that follows on from that. And it's about how and about how we can live under God's blessing and to be distinctive in the world around us. And of course, he uses the analogies of salt and light. So at this particular point in time, Jesus was initially speaking to and challenging his own people. His fellow people had been called to be, by God, the very things of salt and light in the world around them and to those in the world around them as well. So, first of all, Israel was supposed to be the salt of the earth. Now, I'm sure we've heard that phrase before. Oh, she's the salt of the earth. She'll do anything for anyone. She's help anyone. She wouldn't. You've heard that sort of thing so many times before. But the idea here in what Jesus was saying is that God's people were to bring the flavor of God to those around them. They were to be God's seasoning in the world. They were to bring a good taste into the world. And actually, and if you think about the context of it, in a hot country back then that didn't have refrigerators and they used salt as a preservative, God's people were to stop the world from going bad around them. That was many of the functions of salt. However, and here's where the challenge was from Jesus to the people at that point in time, it would seem they were no different and no better than the people around them. They were just as bad as the people around them. They were involved in some unhealthy power politics. They were involved in religious squabbles and factional squabbles as well. That their treatment of the poor and the vulnerable and the marginalized didn't seem to be any different to the peoples and the nations around them. And so how could God, Jesus asked, keep the world from going bad if his own people were just as bad as those nations around them? If his chosen ones, the chosen salt, as it were, had lost its distinctive taste, then how is God going to make a difference in the world when they were supposed to be the difference in the world? Now, of course, those words are not just relevant for back then, and Jesus sort of giving them a slap on the wrist to God's people at that point in time. Those words are relevant to us now. So as Christians, as believers and followers of Jesus, as I've said many times before, who are to be now God's hands and God's feet and God's eyes and God's ears and God's mouth and voice to the world around them, we are now to be that salt in the world. But do we still have that saltiness about ourselves? Do we provide a good and a distinctive flavour to the world around us? Are we the ones who are bringing seasoning into the world? Or do folks not notice any difference? What would people see about us? Have we lost our saltiness too? I must admit, you watch those programs like MasterChef and they'll say something like, oh, it's well seasoned, that. And I sometimes wonder what well seasoned means when they're saying, oh, it's, that piece of meat or fish or the dish itself has been well seasoned. And then when you watch some other programs and say, well, put a pinch of salt in, they grab a handful, chuck it all over it, and you sort of think, my days, that must sort of like, it seems excessive. But somewhere along the line, there's a difference between the distinctive flavour and a good taste that comes with good seasoning and whether we under-season. We are to be that salt. But then, of course, Jesus goes on to the next one, about light. Because Israel were also called to be a light to the nations around them. They were called to be a beacon to others around them. An example of what it was like to live in God's ways, and that would shine out about all the good things about living God's ways and being one of God's people. And yes, one of their tasks, if you like, was to be a reflection to the world and to show up by shining their light to the world, show up that the badness and the evils of the world. But they were also supposed to be a people that helped those who are stumbling around in the dark to find the light and to show them the way. So they were supposed to be a beacon that pointed as well to others. But once again, the challenge was there from Jesus about how that was working and how that was going. Because it would seem that they'd lost the ability to be light bearers to the world around them. In fact, they had kind of, in a sense, become part of the darkness themselves, and they too were stumbling around in the dark. So rather than being people that can help others, they were not even helping themselves in that way. Jesus' warning was this, and it was a challenge as well. Jerusalem, the city itself, was built on a hill. I've never been. Has anybody ever been and done the Holy Land bit? And yeah, okay. So you kind of get the gist of Jerusalem being on top of a hill, I guess. And I guess if you've seen some telly programs, you might have got that picture as well. But because it was built on the top of a hill, he used that sort of symbol of it and saying you're supposed to be a beacon to stand out and shine in the world around us. And again, an example of what a people, what a nation, what a community can be like living out in God's ways and how it could look to others as well. Yet it would seem that, again, along with others, they were just stumbling around in the dark and not actually being the ones who pointed to the true light of God and lead others into that light. Jesus said, do you know what, folks? You might as well, for the good you're doing with that light that you're supposed to be, you might as well get a big bucket and just stick it right over the top, because that's about as much use as it is at this moment in time. But how, as we know, Jesus, in John's Gospel in particular, goes on to say, I am the light of the world. Those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. It would be fair to say that Jesus' light shone out at its greatest, if you like, when he was at the top of a hill. When he was lifted up on that cross, he shone his light out to those around. He revealed, as it were, the depth and the breadth and the length of God's love for each and every one of us. He was a beacon to others at that point in time when he was crucified. We're now, again, as God's people, called to be a light to others, to point towards that true light, both in our words and our actions, and even by our presence. God's light and the light of Christ, wherever we go, goes with us, and it should shine out from us as well to others. So, to finish off with the words once again, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. So therefore, let your light shine before others.
My emotions are up and down, but your love is never down. Oh Lord, I'm so glad you are here. Your love had you die for me, then you came back to life for me. Oh Lord, I'm yours forever. No height or depth, or life or death can separate us from the love of Christ. No angels or demons or all of creation can separate us from the love of Christ. My shackles you tossed away, my sin is so far away, as far as the east from the west.